Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother and sister, welcome back to Islamic Notes channel. Thousands of renowned scientists in China have been known for years as seekers of truth through science. They include physicists, chemists, biology professors, aerospace engineers, and medical researchers. For them, science is the only path to truth. However, who would have thought that a simple verse from the Quran could shake the beliefs of these thousands of scientists and lead them to the light of Islam? It all began at an international scientific conference in Beijing. At the forum, a Muslim scientist from abroad presented his research on the connection between modern science and the Quran. He presented verses that spoke about the creation of the universe, the development of a fetus in the womb, and cosmic phenomena recently discovered by sophisticated telescopes. But one verse silenced the entire room. It read, "We will show them our signs in the universe and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that this Quran is the truth." Surah Fussilat 53. This verse is profound. Scientists accustomed to analyzing facts logically suddenly stopped, as if discovering a missing piece of a puzzle. How could a book revealed more than 1,400 years ago so accurately reflect the spirit of scientific inquiry? How could a holy book speak of natural signs that are now the focus of modern scientists' research? From that day on, thousands of Chinese scientists began studying the Quran. They discovered astonishing explanations about unmixed seas, about mountains as pillars of the earth, about the sky covered by a protective layer, and even about the expansion of the universe, which was only understood after the Big Bang Theory. Discussion after discussion ensued. In laboratories, in classrooms, and even in private meetings, they discussed one thing: the truth of the Quran. Finally, thousands of scientists made the most significant decision of their lives. With trembling hearts and tears in their eyes, they recited the 2 sentences of the Shahada, declaring their conversion to Islam, convinced that this verse and the entire contents of the Quran was not a human creation, but rather a revelation from Allah, the creator of the universe. From that moment on, news of the conversion of thousands of Chinese scientists to Islam spread widely. Many of them are now known not only as scientific experts, but also as callers to truth. They prove that science and faith are not mutually exclusive. In fact, the deeper one delves into research, the closer one becomes to the Creator. This story is clear evidence that a single verse of the Quran can open the door to guidance for thousands. A light that penetrates laboratory walls, penetrates thick research books, and ultimately illuminates the hearts of those sincerely seeking the truth. The journey of guidance for thousands of Chinese scientists did not stop at just one conference. After they discovered verses from the Quran that were so relevant to modern discoveries, many of them began to study Islam more deeply personally. Large libraries in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are witnesses to how books of interpretations of the Quran are starting to be studied side by side with international scientific journals. There was a famous astrophysics professor who for decades researched galaxies and the expansion of the universe. He once said to his students, "I always wonder, why does this world continue to expand endlessly? What is the purpose of all this?" But when he read the verse of the Quran in Surah Az-Zariyat verse 47, which states that Allah has built the heavens and continues to expand them, he burst into tears in his study. For him, it was impossible for humans in the 7th century to know the secrets of the cosmos that had just been confirmed by modern telescopes. A molecular biologist also experienced a big shock. For many years, he researched DNA, cells, and fetal development processes. When he read the verse in Surah Al-Mu'minun, verses 12 to 14, about the creation of humans from dust, then a clot of semen, a clot of blood, a lump of flesh, and finally bones, which were then clothed with flesh, he was stunned. This is exactly the same as the embryology process I taught in class. How could the Quran have explained it in such detail centuries ago? He said, his voice trembling. Not only that, marine scientists in China, studying marine phenomena, also discovered the same truth. They were fascinated to learn that the Quran mentions a separation between the different types of seawater in Surah Ar-Rahman, verses 19 to 20. He lets 2 seas flow and they meet. Between them is a barrier that neither of them transgresses. Modern discoveries prove this to be true, and the scientists can no longer deny it. Day by day, more and more scientists are finding turning points in their lives. They not only acknowledge the truth of the Quran, but also experience an inner peace they could never have found through research alone. A chemistry professor stated, "I've always felt that science only answers the question of how, but never the question of why." Islam provides that answer. Everything was created by Allah for a purpose, and that purpose is for humanity to know Him. News of thousands of scientists converting to Islam in China has finally spread widely. International media have highlighted this phenomenon. Many were surprised, as China has long been known as a country that emphasizes science and technology rather than religion. However, it was from this country that a remarkable wave of guidance emerged. Even more amazingly, the scientists who have converted to Islam have not kept their conversions to themselves. They have begun teaching Islam to their students, writing books on the relationship between science and the Quran, and some have even established special research centers that combine modern science with divine revelation. One of the most touching moments occurred when a mosque in Beijing was packed with hundreds of scientists who simultaneously recited the two sentences of the Shahada. Tears of joy could be heard throughout the room. People who had long been known for their rigid adherence to logic and scientific facts were now softened by the gentle light of faith. They experienced a peace that no amount of intelligence or academic degrees could buy. From this story, the world learns one thing: guidance can come through any path. Some receive it through dreams, others through encounters with pious people, and still others through scientific research. The Quran is a book that not only guides humans in matters of worship, but also invites them to think, research, and explore the secrets of nature. Thousands of renowned scientists in China are now living witnesses that a single verse of the Quran is enough to open a hardened heart. If thousands of scientists accustomed to critical thinking are able to submit to the truth of revelation, then shouldn't we, the humble, more easily accept the light of Islam? And this is proof of Allah's promise in the Quran. The truth will continue to shine, transcending time and space until all humanity knows that the Quran is true. After thousands of scientists in China embraced Islam, their lives changed dramatically. Previously, many of them spent long nights in laboratories, lost in numbers, graphs, and formulas. But now those nights are filled with tahajjud prayers, sincere prayers, and soul-soothing recitations of the Quran. Some say, "I used to seek peace in science, but the more I researched, the emptier my heart became. But after learning about Islam, I felt true peace." Now research is no longer just an ambition, but an act of worship. They began introducing Islam to their families. Most of their wives, children, and even their parents became interested in studying the Quran. Many of them eventually recited the Shahada. In several major cities in China, the atmosphere in mosques has changed, filled with new faces, scientists with advanced degrees, now bowing low before Allah. There's a very touching story. A female scientist, a professor of medicine, initially feared losing her career if she converted to Islam. However, after reflecting on the verses of the Quran, he plucked up the courage to declare the Shahada. He told his students, "I am a doctor. I can cure physical ailments. But only Allah can cure diseases of the heart. That is why I chose Islam." His students wept with emotion, and most of them eventually converted to Islam. This wave of guidance grew. New communities of Muslim scholars emerged in various universities. They discussed not only scientific theories, but also interpretations of the Quran. They encouraged each other, reminded each other, and even began writing scientific journals that combined modern science with the guidance of revelation. This phenomenon attracted international attention. Many media outlets, initially skeptical, now had to acknowledge the reality. Islam was growing rapidly among Chinese scholars. After all, these scientists were no ordinary people. They were authorities in their respective fields. People accustomed to proving everything through research. If they accepted the truth of the Quran, wouldn't that be strong evidence that it was true? But this journey wasn't always easy. There were challenges, pressure, and some even lost their university positions. But they remained steadfast. One scientist said aloud, "We are willing to lose our degrees. We are willing to lose our positions. but we will never be willing to lose the light of faith. Over time, more books were written, more research was conducted, and more lives were touched. Mosques in China were no longer just filled with ordinary merchants or workers, but also with professors, engineers, and doctors. They prostrated together, standing side by side, regardless of rank or title. This story is clear evidence that the Quran is not just a holy book to be read, but also a light for knowledge. A single verse can open the door to guidance for thousands of scientists, and in the future, these verses will continue to guide millions of people around the world to the light of truth. As time passed, news of thousands of Chinese scientists converting to Islam spread. From city to city, from villages to government centers, the news became a topic of conversation. Some were amazed, some curious, and even some in disbelief. How could people of extraordinary intelligence, previously known to believe only in logic and science, now surrender themselves to religion? But the reality was undeniable. They not only recited the Shahada, Islamic declaration of faith, but also lived lives of devotion. Mosques that were once deserted were now filled with highly learned individuals. Quranic manuscripts, once rarely touched, were now regularly brought to lecture halls, laboratories, and meeting rooms. Among the thick scientific books, there were now holy books that served as sources of inspiration and guidance for life. These changes were also evident in their behavior. A physics professor, once known for his stubbornness, became a gentle and humble figure. A medical researcher who once cared only for research and scientific awards was now known for diligently helping the poor. An aerospace engineer, who used to talk about stars and planets, now often engages his students in conversations about the greatness of God, the creator of the universe. This wave of guidance gave birth to a new generation in China. The children of Muslim scientists grew up with a balanced education between worldly and religious knowledge. They were taught to read the Quran from an early age, while also being taught to love knowledge. Within them, the light of faith and reason blended into one. Some of these scientists even began establishing Islamic and scientific research centers. Their research was conducted not only to satisfy curiosity, but also to strengthen faith in God. They wrote passionately, "Every time a microscope reveals a secret, every time a telescope captures the light of a star, it is truly a sign of the greatness of the Creator." Their stories transcended borders. International scientific conferences, once confined to academic presentations, now became platforms for preaching. In front of thousands of researchers from around the world, Chinese Muslim scientists stood with conviction. They said, "We have traveled far in the world of science, but ultimately all that knowledge leads us to Allah. And Islam is the answer to all the questions we have been seeking." Those words shook the hearts of many. There were European scientists who wept silently in their chairs. There were American researchers who secretly searched for translations of the Quran. Even Japanese professors approached them directly and said, "I want to learn more about this religion. Perhaps this is what I have been searching for all my life." Hidayah guidance continued to spread. Thousands became tens of thousands became millions. Islam flourished among academics and scientists, something once thought impossible. The world witnessed a profound reality, that Islam was not a religion that contradicted science, but rather a light that guided science to the ultimate truth. In China, mosques filled with the resounding sound of takbir, recitation of the Quran. The call to prayer grew louder, and among the long rows stood those once known as the geniuses of the nation, now prostrating themselves on an equal footing with the common people. All were equal before Allah. This phenomenon reminded the world of Allah's promise in the Quran, that He would show His signs in the universe until it became clear that His revelation was true. And indeed, a single verse shook the hearts of thousands of scientists. The story is not over. These scientists are now shining lights on the world. They write, speak, and preach. They are living witnesses that the truth of Islam cannot be overturned by logic. Instead, straight logic will lead to Islam. And perhaps this is the beginning of a great awakening. From a country known for technology and research, a shining light of faith is now born. A light that will continue to spread, transcending boundaries of nation, language, and skin color. A light that will illuminate the world until the end of time. wave of guidance that began with a single verse of the Quran has now become a powerful current that is difficult to stem. The world is witnessing an extraordinary phenomenon. Thousands of scientists who once relied on reason are now prostrating themselves in submission to the Creator. They have not lost their reason. In fact, their minds have sharpened, now receiving the light of revelation. Over time, Muslim scientists in China began to build a global dawah network. They collaborated with Muslim scientists in the Middle East, Europe, and even America. Together, they created an international conference entitled Science and the Quran for Humanity. The conference was not only a scientific event, but also a platform for dawah, touching the hearts of thousands of participants from various countries. There, a Chinese scientist who was once an atheist declared aloud, "We spent our lives searching for answers in the laboratory, but it turns out the answers were written long ago in the Holy Qur'an. We realized truth doesn't always have to be found through a microscope or telescope. True truth is when the heart submits to Allah." These words became a spark that ignited the passion of many. Young scientists from around the world were inspired. They felt convinced that Islam was not a barrier to progress, but rather a light that guided knowledge toward its true goal. In China itself, this phenomenon transformed society. Mosques that were once quiet now bustled with activity. Universities held Quranic study groups alongside physics and mathematics classes. Libraries displayed Quranic interpretations on the same shelves as scientific journals. Young people began to aspire not only to become professors, but also to memorize the Quran. However, this journey remained fraught with trials. Some lost their jobs, others faced discrimination, and some were even forced to leave their positions at research institutions. But none of this deterred them. With faces full of conviction, they declared, "We would rather lose the world than lose our faith. We would rather lose our positions than lose the Quran." With each passing day, their numbers grew, from thousands to tens of thousands, then to millions. The light of Islam began to shine brightly in this land, once known as a stranger to the religion. These scientists not only became Muslims, but also became role models for dawah, Islamic preaching. They wrote books, produced documentaries, and even established Islamic research centers. This phenomenon led many to ask, if scientists who spent their lives devoted to science finally submitted to Islam, then what reason do we have to continue to doubt? The world was reminded of Allah's promise in the Quran, Surah An-Nur, verse 35, "Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth." And indeed, that light now radiated from hearts that were once dark. These scientists were convinced that what they were experiencing was not the end, but the beginning of a great revival. For the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had once said that Islam would enter every house, whether made of stone or clay. Now they felt part of that great promise. So they resolved not only to become researchers of world science, but also to become warriors who would bring the light of Islam to every corner of the earth. With their knowledge, they bridge humanity to the truth. With the faith they hold, they bear witness that the Quran is a living book, a book that will remain relevant until the end of time. And this is the end. A single verse of the Quran shook thousands of scientists in China and then shook the world. The light of guidance continues to spread from heart to heart, from nation to nation, until one day that light will fill the earth and humanity will realize that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. A single verse of the Quran has shaken the hearts of thousands of Chinese scientists. Those who once believed only in logic now feel the peace of faith. From their research, they find evidence, and from their evidence, they find God. Now these professors, engineers, and doctors stand in line in prayer, their foreheads on the ground, submitting only to Allah.